We already have the speaker with us, so without taking much time, we'll start the proceedings. I request Dr. O.P. Jakhar to kindly welcome the speaker and all the participants formally and say a few words. Dr. Jakhar, please.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, everyone. I feel immense pleasure to formally welcome Professor Phanindra from IIT Hyderabad as a speaker in this session. In fact, Dr. Phanindra has already visited our institute twice, and he is our mentor in Technical Education Quality Improvement Program Phase 3rd. He has nicely the mentoring our institute and suggested so many schemes for the improvement of the technical education and improvement of our college also, the working and governance and academic and research also. So thank you, Professor Phanindra, for accepting our invitation and for nice mentoring to both the institution. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for accepting and sharing spared your valuable time for this session as a speaker. And I also welcome all the participants in this session again. And once again, welcome Dr. Phanindra and participants all. Thank you. Over to Professor Satan.
Thank you, Dr. Jakhar, for extending warm welcome to the honorable speaker and to all the participants. Thank you so much. I now request Dr. S.D. Chalak. Dr. Phanindra, he is a faculty at NIT Kurukshetra Civil Engineering Department. You might have met, maybe, I'm not sure. So, Dr. S.D. Chalak, to kindly introduce the speaker to the participants and to us all. Dr. Chalak, please.
Thank you, sir. Good morning to everyone. It is my proud privilege to introduce the eminent personality, Professor K.P.V.N. Phanindra of IIT Hyderabad. Being an expert of the session, the expert is a well-known academician and very good researcher. He will talk on sustainable irrigation in agriculture practices in Indian contents, a case study of paddy management. The expert has completed bachelor degree in civil engineering from KL College of Engineering, Guntur, masters in hydraulics and water resources engineering from IIT Kanpur, also a graduate minor in GS system and PhD in water resource engineering from New Mexico State University, USA. Before joining IIT Hyderabad, he has worked as a faculty member in BITS Pilani. He mainly working in the area of groundwater and agricultural water management. He has 12 research articles published in international journal, also having 10 research articles in proceedings of international conferences and 11 in proceedings of national conferences. He has 2 book chapters published in the area. He has completed 7 research projects funded by different government agencies and provided consultancy in the domain area. He is guiding number of PhD scholars and MTech students. Once again, on the behalf of organizing committee comprising NIT Kurukshetra and ECB Bikaner, I welcome the expert and requesting Professor Satan sir to take the charge of the session.
Thank you, Dr. Chalak, for this nice introduction of the speaker. In fact, Dr. Phanindra is such a versatile person who carries the international exposure and who's handling so many real-time projects of the Government of India and other agencies. So wonderful man, and somebody who's very accomplished in the domain area of water resource management and handling a project at the all India level as well. So we really feel privileged, Dr. Phanindra, to have you for this session. So thank you so very much for accepting our invitation and being there with us today. So without taking much time, I welcome you once again, and over to you. You may please start your session, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Satans and Professor Jakhar, mainly for the invitation and also very nice association I had with you. Thank you very much. And of course, I will start my presentation. So can I share my screen?
Yes, please do that. Please do that.
Yes. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah, we can see the screen. I think it's clearly visible.
Okay, yeah. So you can even see the last line, 5 July 2020, right?
Yeah, we can see the last line. Even, yeah.
Fine, sure. Thank you. So, a very good morning to all the participants. I hope you are really enjoying the online short-term training program. And sincerely thanks to all of you because you are even attending on Sunday. That too, of course, it's on the last day of the program. But nowadays, actually, even we are unable to recognize which is Sunday, which is a working day. Things are going into a really bad shape. So, okay. So again, thanks to all of you. So my topic of presentation is on sustainable irrigation and agricultural practices in Indian context. Particularly, I go with the application to paddy management, which is actually the part of one of my PhD students' work. So first I will briefly go with what is sustainable irrigation and what is sustainable agriculture. Okay, why we have to ensure efficient sustainability in irrigation and agriculture. Then let us first go with two success stories. One is on the case of Netherlands, which of course has a good fertile land, good amount of water, and how it went into a succeeded mine. And second, let us go with another case study which actually overcome the difficulties from the climatic extremes in terms of the high temperatures, low water availability, and so on, still, which is coped up very well, the case of Israel. Then, once getting into these two success stories, I will just go with, okay, what are the real challenges in the Indian context in terms of the proper efficient management of, in terms of irrigation and agriculture. Then I will go into the details of my students' work, how effectively paddy or rice crop can be managed under three sustainable strategies. One is on deficit irrigation, another is on ET estimation and partition algorithms, and the case third one is partly I will discuss on weather forecast in irrigation. Then I will end up with my the conclusions of this presentation. So sustainable agriculture, as you are aware, they mainly aim at meeting the societal needs. Maybe you might have already gone through sustainable materials in the previous lecture, sustainable waste management, where on all the cases, all the sustainable practices, they aim at actually meeting the needs of the society without compromising on the ability to meet the requirements of the future generation. In other words, how efficiently I can meet the requirements of the society. Maybe when you talk about sustainable agricultural practices, how efficiently you can meet the societal needs of the food requirements without compromising on, okay, so that the next generation or the next level should not be suffered. Next levels should not be suffered in the sense, I should not actually go with actually the resources, in the sense actually, if it is a renewable resource, actually, without actually depleting those renewable resources, how best I can think of using some non-renewable resources or using the renewable resources so efficiently that actually I can meet the requirements is what you generally deal with the sustainability, right? So sustainability mainly in terms of agriculture, they generally include how efficiently I can irrigate the crops, maybe using a drip irrigation, maybe using micro irrigation system, maybe using a sprinkler irrigation system, or how efficiently I can capture and store the water using conservation or harvesting structures, how efficiently I can minimize the water application, in the sense how efficiently I can improve the water application efficiencies, and irrigation scheduling, in the sense actually mainly timing and amount, how much at what time, at how much amount of water is required for each crop, all those things, how to analyze those things, and how to go crops. Means sometimes actually your climate doesn't permit to go with this seeds, so how you go with actually drought tolerant crops, alternate wetting and drying, because a continuous wetting or continuous feeding will definitely result in a huge water losses. So how can I go with alternate wetting and dry farming, effective storage and transportation after the harvest? Once the crop is harvested, how effectively I can store and transport so that it reach its minimum sales price and marketability issues are resolved. And more importantly, how I will maintain the ecological balance without actually depleting the resources or actually increasing energy consumption or depleting the water resources, how efficiently I can manage the crop. maybe using some mulching or crop covers in greenhouse conditions and so on. So all these strategies comes under sustainable agricultural practices. All these practices mainly aim for increasing the productivity or meeting the societal needs, food needs, without compromising the quality or without depleting the natural resources. That is all what about the sustainable agriculture is all about. So sustainable agriculture irrigation is most often generally used in conjunction with the term precision irrigation. But precision irrigation is mostly is something like a smart irrigation where you understand the real-time water requirements or real-time crop water requirements or pest requirements or maybe the nutrient requirements, and then you supply those things in a right time using some through a real-time decision support systems. Similarly, precision agriculture is also a similar thing where you mainly observe actually how the crops are growing, how the crop variabilities are changing using maybe a real-time decision support system or through the sensor system to optimize the returns. So again, sustainable agriculture is more about talking about the increase in the crop yield or the food production, whereas sustainable irrigation mostly talks about improving or giving a right amount of water, right amount of artificial water, or minimize the losses. That is what actually the irrigation or these things means for. The first success story is about Netherlands. Probably you know that actually it's a very small country of just 40,000 square kilometers compared to just imagine 3.29 million hectares is actually what is the geographical area of India. So it's much smaller than that one. But the good thing with Netherlands or the Dutch is it has a good amount of water availability, almost like 20% of the freshwater resources are available. So mainly because it is actually lies along the delta region of a number of very important rivers of the Europe. And also the temperature of the climate is pretty much temperate, that means fairly good, and good amount of rainfall distribution, almost like 800 mm annual rainfall. And the soils are pretty fertile because the land is on a deltaic region. So the Netherlands, it has a good amount of water, good amount of soil, good amount of climate conditions, and so on, whatnot. So the favorable conditions for the agriculture do exist for Netherlands. But the problem is the land area. The area is pretty small. So they went for actually pretty much novel agricultural techniques, wherein actually they, for example, mainly the support from the state-of-the-art agricultural research and education system is so high that actually they went for a number of agricultural reforms or new techniques that helps them, that resulted them in becoming the second top in terms of the agricultural exports after years, almost like 58 billion euros in 2017, which is contributing to almost like 17% of their GDP, their country's GDP. So the agricultural exports are pretty high for Netherlands, mainly because they practice precision agricultural system. They use the IT and sensor systems for optimal health and productivity of the crop with less amount of resources. They mainly go for greenhouse farming, which uses less water and less energy, and also optimal growth because actually things are under control. The climate, humidity, pressure deficiency, things are under your control. They also go for hydroponic system, growing particularly for tomatoes and vegetables, where actually that doesn't require actually the soil as the base. And they implement all the new techniques and innovations that actually result in actually high crop yields. Mainly they use the soil scans, mainly to know the soil fertility, soil quality, soil nutrient conditions, soil, and also they use the thermal cameras for detecting the water stress, because when crop water required for the crop goes down, the crop is experiencing a water stress. That water stress actually could be detected using the thermal cameras, or actually the cameras operating in the thermal band of the electromagnetic spectrum, so that you can actually trigger the irrigation at a very right amount of time. So triggering the irrigation at a very right amounts, and using the mechanized formation, and using the greenhouse or actually the covered system for farming or the vertical levels of irrigation, they made actually the Netherlands to have very high yields in a very lesser area. The second condition is of Israel. Okay, so it's also one of the smallest country and mostly densely populated. But the problem is only 20% of the land is arable. So unlike the Netherlands case, where most of the land is fertile, the Israel condition is pretty different, where actually most of the land is actually arid, close to arid, which is actually doesn't fit for a good because of. Another drawback for them is they have high diverse land and climatic conditions. But they took this as an advantage, and these diverse climate conditions, they actually grow. For example, if you see a large number of crops are being grown, particularly a wet crop or a dry crop, actually, all kind of crops, like for example, dates and so on, which requires a less amount of water, and also paddy and all, which actually requires a huge amount of water, like sugarcane and so on. So they took their drawbacks as the existing drawbacks is an advantage to go with a high amount of crop yields. Particularly, they are the pioneers in resulting in the paradigm shift in the agriculture through drip irrigation system, which we are actually all familiar with. So they also go heavily with mechanized farming and harvesting techniques and climate controlling or climate monitoring greenhouse conditions. They do a lot of irrigation in the climate controlled greenhouse conditions because their extreme climates doesn't actually allow them to grow. And they also go with extending shelf life of the fruits, particularly vegetables and fruits, so that after the harvesting time, they will be given some sufficient time for the transport and selling, because the shelf life of the fruit they cover actually, so that actually you will still the odor or actually the aroma and all still is preserved, but the fruit doesn't actually go into bad shape actually. So its life is even increased even after the harvesting. So agricultural waste are mainly used for crop fertilizer, recycling, reusing, and renewable energy source. So if you observe that actually they are not only practicing the innovative or novel irrigation or strategies, but also using actually the existing resources in a recycled manner, and the recycled waste is also being sent back to the crop as a fertilizer or the irrigation water. So they are also practicing a lot sustainable techniques like drip irrigation, water recycling. Almost like more than 86% of wastewater is actually being recycled and sent to the crops, irrigation crops. Advanced crop health monitoring techniques. They are another kind of a pioneers, wherein actually they use a large number of satellite imagery like actually Sentinel, Landsat, MODIS data sets, aerial photographs, drone-based images, and sensors a lot, and big data mainly to consider identify the crop health during its growth or during its phenological stage, and then act very perfectly. That means they particularly identify the crop condition or health condition, and immediately they will react so that the crop conditions or yield is being increased. And more grain to the markets using the grain pro cocoons is one of their inventions. Precision agriculture, mainly sensor driven, is where heavily being used in Israel, and squeezing every drop of water from the air, because their annual rainfall is much lower. So hardier seeds for better crops through seed breeding and all. So go with a seed which could be resistant to the droughts or actually the harsh weathers, and also increase the good outputs. So these are a few photographs that are being followed by in most of the developed countries. For example, see, you can actually see the pesticide spraying using the drones, because it covers a larger area. For example, sometimes actually the pesticide requirement could be required only on the plants or the flowers or actually the leaves actually at the surface level, so that actually these are very efficient and also minimize the time, cost, and so on. The bottom left corner is mostly about the kind of a drip irrigation system. Mainly, you can see the crops, actually the vegetable crops grown in the furrows, and so that actually the optimal water is directly going to the plant root condition. And here you can see in the top middle, is a sensor based driven, actually the real time. All this actually being connected to the server and identifying there actually the conditions and then reacting. And you see the bottom actually the clear greenhouse system, where actually the bottom center one is actually hydroponic system, where at the soil base, so through the hydroponic system they are actually growing these tomatoes. And the bottom right is a fully covered actually greenhouse system, where they control the climate conditions and then actually go with the improved crop conditions. So these are actually the few cases where from the Netherlands and Israel, where actually the improved crop yield is happening with less amount of resources. These are actually the success of various sustainable strategies. But are they really happening in Indian conditions? Mostly not. We should agree to the fact that actually most of the techniques or most of the sustainable practices that aim at improving the crop yields with less amount of resources, less amount of manpower, less amount of energy that are happening elsewhere are mostly not being actually replicated to Indian conditions, because it has its own limitations. The main limitation is actually the small and fragmented landholds, because the average landhold person actually per farmer is pretty much less than 2.5 hectares. In many cases it's even less than 1 hectare, even 0.5 hectares and so on. So when you have a fragmented or marginal, these marginal farmers actually, it will be very difficult actually to implement sustainable strategies. If you see my previous slides, most of the sustainable strategies were happened on much larger areas, because the implementation is more efficient or economical when the area is pretty high. And another one is monsoon delays and insufficient rainfall. In Indian context, rainfall is not uniform throughout the year. It's most concentrated with 3 to 4 months in the southwest, June to September. So there is a high temporal variability, and also there is high spatial variability. For example, see the western part of the India, near Bikaner and all, they experience an annual rainfall of less than 150 or 200 mm. Whereas see the northeast part of the India, where the annual rainfall is close to more than 2,500 mm. On an average, the annual rainfall in India close to 100 mm is pretty much scattered throughout the space. So that is another major challenge. And irrigation availability, particularly the availability and all, is actually another major challenge. Lack of mechanization. If you observe, the mechanization is slowly entering into Indian agricultural farming sector, that too particularly for harvesting, particularly when someone has to actually do the harvesting or post-harvesting strategies, but not during the crop growth season in terms of the pesticide spraying or in terms of the water application, in terms of the crop health detection and so on. Still, a lot of mechanization is still very much required. Next is soil erosion condition, wherein actually the whole industry is so may pretty the water or air displaced soil actually will remove the fertility from the top soil. Agricultural marketing is another major drawback in India, wherein actually the post-harvesting storage facilities or actually post-harvesting market facilities are not very as good as what they are existing in the other countries. Mainly because insufficient storage facilities, insufficient transport facilities, or insufficient the long-term storage facilities will not allow a farmer to transport it to much longer places, because they cannot sustain for such a longer period. So obviously he has to actually compromise on actually the transport, because these are not actually sufficient enough. So he will go with the nearby markets and so on. Obviously the price will go down. And another major disadvantage is also capital scarcity. So in terms of the capital, in spite of the government subsidies, the capital scarcity is very high for agricultural demand in Indian scenario. So with these conditions, now we can actually we can actually have some, maybe some footnotes or conclusions. Okay, so India still has to go a lot with sustainable irrigation or sustainable agricultural practices. Okay, some hindrances may be from small existing geological conditions like fragmented lands, or the meteorological conditions like uneven rainfall distribution and so on, and some other financial constraints like actually the inability to afford for the mechanization or the capital scarcity and so on and so on. These things are where actually India needs to be included a lot. Now, actually, I will go with the main presentation where the paddy management, where one of my PhD scholars actually is working. Rice is a principal nutritional and staple diet, mainly for the eastern and southern people, of course, throughout the country, but mainly for these people, it's actually the one. And the main worrying point is actually the second point. Globally, India ranks first in terms of the cultivation by area. So in terms of the area it is being cultivated, it is very high. Second in terms of the production after China. So, but 62nd in terms of the crop productivity. That means the production per unit of area, we are ranking at the number 62 in the world. We have a good amount of area, we have good amount of production, still we have very low amount of accuracy or efficiency, because we are standing almost like a 62nd position, where on an average 3000 kilograms per hectare of productivity, means per 1 hectare of land irrigated, 3600 kgs of rice grains are being produced. We are actually growing in 43.9 million hectares of area, though we are actually getting this one. So given this one, actually, another drawback, another third point is also very worrying point. Rice is a very water intense crop, because rice and sugarcane are the heavily demanding water crops, and rice consumes almost 221 billion cubic of water annually, which is almost like more than 50% of the groundwater replenishable resources, which is almost like 80% of the total irrigation water supplies in the country. So if you observe, most of the irrigation water supplied in the country is going for irrigating the rice. So the second point and third point are pretty, these are catchy points for us. I'm supplying a very good amount of water for irrigation, and in that actually 80% is actually I'm sending to paddy crop, and there is a huge paddy crop area, there is a huge production. Then why the crop productivity is very, very less? Why the crop productivity is very less? If you see crop water productivity means per 1 meter cube of water that you are delivering, how much kgs of crop is actually harvest is happening. The crop productivity is actually per 1 hectare, how much crop is coming up. Crop water productivity means per 1 meter cube of water being delivered, how much crop I am able to get. This is much lower in comparison to the rice growing areas of other countries. So these last 2 points are really worrying points. Crop productivity is very low. Crop water productivity is also very, very low for rice. Why the crop product productivity for rice is very low? Of course, most of the reasons are actually discussed. Fragmentation of the agricultural lands. When you have fragmentation, it will pose difficulty to implement the sustainable strategies. Erratic rainfalls, short growing seasons. The growing seasons also short in comparison to the other countries, and ineffective use of the proximal and remote sense data sets. So we are able to use the pretty proximal data sets like weather station data sets, or satellite data sets, or drone based data sets for effective management. Uncontrolled and scientific application of the irrigation water, where actually we are not really, if you see the farmers of India, they generally go with very unscientific traditional approach of supplying irrigation water. They don't mind. And lack of scientific understanding. These are actually the major reasons for the crop productivity. Of course, just before going to the main presentation, this is actually the crop phenological stages. You have different stages: seedbed stage, then transplant stage, vegetative reproduction, ripening, and the stage length is given, duration, and the water requirement in each stage is given by the vertical bars. If you see, mostly the rice growing states, these are actually the top 10. Of course, all are there, but these are the top states in the country. Okay, so given this knowledge or given this backgrounds, my first case study is all about role of deficit irrigation strategies on crop water and yield management. So what motivated us to take this test case one? The first case is methodologies for crop water and yield estimation are not well calibrated for Indian conditions or Indian crops. So there are existing methodologies for the crop water management and yield management, but they are not well calibrated. What's wrong in it? Like, why can't you use those methodologies and directly apply for Indian conditions? Because Indian agroclimatic conditions are different from the agroclimatic conditions of the other region. So before using your model, first you have to well calibrate that model. So such methodologies were not pretty much developed. Of course, they have been developed, but they still need to be improved. The next is crop water productivity of Indian rice is much lower than rice growing seasons. So I'm supplying good amount of water, but I'm getting less amount of rice crop or the harvest. Why it is happening? And the third most important reason or motivation is many state governments are giving subsidies to the farmers in terms of the free or subsidies powers. For example, the state of Andhra Pradesh and state of Telangana gives almost like 9 hours of free power to the farmers. Okay, so obviously when a farmer is given a free power, obviously he will choose the reliable source is groundwater resource because it is easily affordable and he can go to the deeper depths and then he can extract as much as water he can. So because of this free power given to the farmers or subsidized power given to the farmers, it has resulted in a clear shift in the cultivation and cropping patterns. So in terms of the cultivation means earlier people used to go for only one crop per year. Now they are maybe going for 2 or 3 even crops growing per in an agricultural year, maybe because they have a good amount of water, and also resulting in the shift of the crop patterns and so on. Earlier, they may used to go for pulses, or they may used to go for cotton, they may used to go for maize and so on. Now, most of the time, people are switching to paddy and sugarcane because paddy and sugarcane are the heavy water required crops. And when I have a free power, okay, there is no problem for me. I can go for paddy because I can get a good amount of yield, or I can go for sugarcane because I can get good returns. So state subsidies are given to the farmers is another drawback. I should not say drawback. It's not well received or well taken by the farmers in terms of the management. So our first objective is one second. So the first objective is let us calibrate and validate the sim-dual KC model coupled with Stewart model, because this sim-dual KC model can simulate the crop water requirements and the Stewart model simulates the biomass. So let us take a coupled model that couples the crop water and yield requirements and calibrate and validate for the rice crop of the South Indian agroclimatic conditions. That is our first objective. Then develop the crop coefficient curves and yield response factors for rice of the South India. Why you have to develop? Because if someone else is working on the paddy management in a different sense, they can simply use our developed crop coefficient curves or yield response curves and quickly work with the various management strategies. And the third important objective is evaluate the role of water limiting strategies on crop water yield dynamics. So if I produce water limiting strategies, if I reduce the amount of water being supplied to the crop, what is happening to the crop yield and what is happening to the crop growth? This is what is actually my objective. Then we consider some private lands in the Vijayanagaram of Andhra Pradesh. This is actually the location, and we did field experiments Of course, we did experiments for 3 seasons, but eventually we did not consider the second season for many reasons, because second season has altogether a different climatic conditions and also different growing length and crop phenological length stages. So we only consider stages 1 and 3 for our experiments, and we conducted factorial experiments. So we imposed 4 conditions. We consider T1 as a traditional irrigation. Traditional irrigation, I mean irrigating based on the farmer's intuitive choice. So farmer has no restriction on the use of water, pesticides, and so on. So whatever the farmer is currently doing in the real conditions, we consider actually that irrigation condition. Then we impose low stress, medium stress, and high stress. Low stress resulting in 90% of the TI depths, irrigation depths. Medium stress means 75% of the irrigation, and we increase the stress condition of the crop progressively, 90, 75, and 50, to see whether actually this condition of stress will have any impact on the. This is how actually the left side figure you can see. This is how actually we consider the field experiments T1, T2, T3, T4, traditional irrigation, low stress, medium stress, and high stress conditions. And the right one is actually we fabricated the lysimeter, because lysimeter is the one which actually measures the evapotranspiration. So to have that one, we fabricated lysimeter on our own and installed in every of these agricultural fields. Okay, so this is actually how the field experiments took place. This is actually the lysimeter construction, the lowering of the lysimeter, and actually this is actually micro lysimeter during the growth, and then weighing of this lysimeter on a weekly basis to know how much water is actually being going away and returning. So we monitor various meteorological conditions during the crops, 2 crop seasons, because we consider 2 crop seasons of 2017 and 18, because we don't want to take any chance and to see whether actually things are being properly replicated or not. So we have the daily temperatures are high during transplantation stage and low during the ripening stage, the relative humidity, rainfall, and so on. So this is essentially how actually we the meteorological parameters are actually being varying, and this is how actually the supplementary irrigation has been given to for season 1 we supplied 360 mm, season 3 we supplied 340 mm. And this is actually the variabilities in various parameters like maximum temperature and minimum temperature. You can clearly see the peaks are in the initial stages, slowly going down. The solar irrigation is pretty much going down in season 1 and season 2. If you observe, the variability or the trends between season 1 and season 3 are pretty similar, except for the precipitation, because precipitation you have a relatively higher precipitation in season 1 but lower in season 2. But season 2 experienced a huge precipitation during the vegetation phase, but this actually resulted in huge precipitation in the ripening stage 1. So we simulated using SimGLKC, because SimGLKC is actually the is FAO recommended one, Food and Agriculture Organization, suggested by United Nations. So we went with the SimGLKC model for simulating the soil water crop, and we considered the daily time step, and this is how actually the crop ET or the water requirement is actually estimated. This is how actually this crop stress is actually estimated based on the total available water and root zone depletions. And we estimated the crop coefficient curves and also yield response. So yield response curve using the Stewart equation. This is the Stewart equation. We estimated the KY, which is actually yield response factor. So this model is simulated for all the 4 conditions: traditional irrigation, low stress, medium stress, and high stress. And before actually giving our results, first we want to know whether the model is doing correctly or not. So we calibrated our model with the soil moisture conditions and also the ET fluxes, and we observed that actually all the 4 conditions the model is doing really good. So, and these are actually basal crop coefficient curves and various model parameters for different strategies: T1, T2, T3, and T4. these parameters does not vary between the strategies, mainly because soil properties does not change. These are all mostly the soil-based properties. These are mostly the crop-based parameters. So crop-based parameters change a lot because you are allowing different stresses to be experienced by the plants. And this is actually how the crop coefficient curves are varying with time, with different stages. This is actually the single crop coefficient curves. These are actually the dual crop coefficient curves, because we want to give both single and dual crop coefficient curves to the stakeholders, mainly because if someone wants only to know about the crop water requirements, he will be using some single crop coefficient curves. Or if someone wants to use actually the crop management strategies, like you want to go with play with different alternate management practices, like with mulching or maybe with partial drying and wetting scenarios and all, you will be using the dual crop coefficient curves. Then we also actually estimated the crop yield dynamics. This is actually the yield dynamics for different stages. For example, stage 1, T1, T2, T3, T4. For example, if you observe actually the gap between this actually is pretty much low for the high stress conditions. So point is actually this is actually the crop stress is experienced for different irrigation strategies. Similarly, this is actually the crop water productivity. We estimated both crop water productivity underscore T, which is total, crop water productivity underscore E, which is efficient, because we are not only interested in the crop productivity generated for 1 unit of water supplied, but we are also interested in knowing what is the crop water productivity developed for 1 unit of water transpired, because water that is transpired is actually what is the efficiency. So based on this, actually, we observed actually the crop water productivities are pretty much matching with the case of what is given in the published reports. So this is actually how the ET dynamics are changing. This is actually the right figure tells actually how the contribution of E and T are changing with time. So what the fraction of E is actually pretty much significant in the most of the initial stages, because initial stages the bonding happens for a the conclusion actually that there is a lot scope, particularly to reduce the water requirement, particularly in a given stages. So from case study 1, the conclusions actually are that model simulated soil water content and ET fluxes are pretty good. So your model is good for analyzing the results. And contribution of transpiration to simulated EC fluxes is pretty good, 80 to 80 closer. And effective crop water productivity is in the range of 1.16 to 1.04, and significant amount of applied water is lost through deep percolation. That is a worrying part for us. If you observe actually the last but one point, significant amount of applied water is lost through deep percolation. That is mainly because the current practices that are happening, because the farmer uses a huge amount of water for the crop, and the crop which is much higher than the crop requirements. So after the saturation, because of the percolation, a huge water is actually being added to the groundwater, which is actually a clear unwanted situation. And crop water productivity of rice found to be slightly higher under water stress conditions. So water stress condition, the CWP is higher, and the reduction in the water usage is also pretty good. Fine. Before going to my case 2, I will just stop for a minute, and I just want to know if there are any issues with my presentation, voice or video. Hello?
No issue, sir. No issue. It's everything is fine.
Sir, okay, sir. Both video and audio are good. Okay, sir, right?
Yeah, both are good.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I just want to know, because where the connection has been lost, actually, I just want to be aware. That's the only reason. Thank you, Jakar, sir. So the second study talks about the quantification and partitioning of the evapotranspiration. Why it is required, again for paddy. So crop water requirements are mainly satisfied through ET, means how much of water that crop is required is estimated by is measured by estimating crop evapotranspiration, or which is also known as crop consumptive use. So crop ET or evapotranspiration is the amount of water that is effectively transpired by the from the crop and also from the surrounding soil. The point is ET, it's very difficult to separate E and T from ET because ET is generally measured as a combined loss from the crop and its surrounding soil. But ET is composed of two components. One is productive transpiration and unproductive evaporation. Why we are using the word productive? Because the transpiration, transpired water is the one which is actually taken up by the roots, goes through the stems, axillary xylem, and then used in the photosynthesis component, and then actually released through the stomata openings of the leaves. So this is actually the quantity of water which is efficiently used by the plant in the biomass production. Whereas the unproductive evaporation is actually the amount of water which is actually lost from the interception or from the bare soil or from just the soil moisture condition. So if someone wants a sustainable irrigation strategy, first I want to know if my ET is, say suppose 6 mm on a day, what is T fraction and what is E fraction, whether my T fraction is 64% and so on. Therein, because if I know T fraction and E fraction, then I will do some techniques, apply some techniques to minimize the E fraction and maximize the T fraction, because I want to improve the productivity and decrease the unproductivity of my consumptive use. So partitioning of evapotranspiration is very, very, very essential step for applying irrigation strategies, sustainable irrigation strategies. If you want to apply mulching technique, if you want to apply some deficit irrigation strategies, if you want to apply some any sustainable irrigation strategy, first you want to know what is the fraction of transpiration and what is the fraction of evaporation. So our aim is estimating and partitioning ET at high accuracy to maximize the fraction of T components. Then what is another motivation for taking up this research? Second task, a number of ET estimation methods are already available. However, their efficacy to Indian conditions is still questionable, and also which method I have to use or at what accuracy I can use is still questionable. So with this motivation, we defined our objectives for second task. The second task objectives are evaluate the performance of three contrasting methods, three different methods. So we use three methods. One is empirical estimates and mechanistic methods and correlation based estimates in quantifying and bifurcating the ET fluxes from flood irrigated rice fields. So we applied three different techniques to see whether empirical techniques were good or mechanistic or correlation based. And we analyzed the diurnal and seasonal patterns of ET and ET fluxes for rice crop, and we investigated the role of various meteorological and phenological characteristics on ET partition. What is contributing to ET partition and what is not. So study area, again, the previous experiments were conducted in 2017 and 18. Now we switch it to 2018 and 19, and we consider the same agricultural farmlands in Andhra Pradesh, India, wherein actually we consider two crop seasons of 18-19. It's not 17-18, it's 18-19. We used a lot many instrumentations in our second experiment. We used automatic weather station to monitor the meteorological data sets. We used the soil moisture sensors along with data logger to monitor the soil moisture at different levels on a real-time basis. We also estimated the leaf area index because the mechanistic methods uses the leaf area index values. We use the LICOR LA 220C, and more importantly, we use the eddy covariance flux tower mainly to get the high frequency micrometeorological fluxes. This is how actually the eddy covariance tower looks like. Actually, eddy covariance. It's a combination of two things: covariance of the eddies. covariance of any two variables in statistics sense actually is given by this expression, how both are actually covariated, right? So this eddy covariance tower will directly measures or monitors the exchange of carbon, temperature and water fluxes between the plant and the atmosphere. So how much water actually, how much carbon is leaving the plant, how much temperature is leaving the plant are measured very accurately at a very high temporal resolution. So this is one of the very highly accurate method for ET estimation, and which is ET estimate as the covariance between water vapor and vertical wind speeds. This is given by, so the covariance between water vapor, which is rho v, and also vertical wind speed W prime. This W prime and rho v prime are actually the deviations from the mean. That's why the overbar is there actually. However, partition, see, micrometeorological or flux tower is very good for ET estimation, but is it really good for ET partitioning? Mostly not. We need to test. That is what we have done in our case. So we use three conditions. The first one is an empirical methods, which uses the Penman and Monteith, because the reason for using the Penman Monteith is it's a worldwide accepted methods. Most of the people uses the Penman and Monteith for estimating the reference. It is also the FAO recommended, Food and Agricultural Organization by UN recommended methods. So we use the Penman and Monteith for estimating the reference ET and estimated the crop evaporation using the stress coefficient. This is all the values like R and G and all we get from the automatic weather station. So we install the automatic weather station to get these parameters at a 30-minute interval and averaged over each day. We got actually the reference ET and then actually the crop evapotranspiration fluxes. So it mainly combines the energy balance and the mass transfer approaches, considering a hypothetical reference crop. Here the hypothetical reference crop we consider is the short grass. The second method is actually the Priestley-Taylor method. The reason for considering this Priestley-Taylor method is it requires much lesser number of parameters. So because it's when you don't have a detailed micrometeorological conditions. For example, if some farmer says actually I don't have a weather station in my field or in my, but I still need to estimate the ET. So he can simply go with a low actually mechanistic models like Priestley-Taylor methods, which is actually the lambda ET using the bulk Priestley-Taylor coefficient alpha b, and this is actually the transpiration and evapotranspiration coefficients are actually being split up. The third method is the flux variance similarity methods, where the intention this is actually where actually the ET given by the flux tower or eddy covariance flux tower. Eddy covariance will give four components. Two components related to water vapor, two components related to photosynthesis. Two components related to water vapor could be something like actually, of course, it won't give, but still you can partition is the evaporation and transpiration. Similarly, the two components related to photosynthesis are the photosynthesis are actually the actual photosynthesis respiration. If you see, these flux variance similarity methods mainly works on the correlations between various components of photosynthesis, carbon fluxes and the water vapor fluxes. For example, if you see, it's based on the assumption that stomatal carbon and water vapor fluxes are negatively correlated with a slope equal to water use efficiency. What does it mean? The ratio between carbon fluxes and water fluxes is water efficiency, because carbon flux by water flux means what? For one water flux, how much carbon is generated, or per unit of water I have supplied, how much photosynthesis activity has been happened. That is what my water use efficiency is. The next one is the non-stomatal fluxes are positively correlated with unit slope. The non-stomatal respiration and non-stomatal evaporation, they are correlated positively. That means if the evaporation is high, the respiration is also high. Similarly, if the evaporation is low, the respiration component is also low. Combining these two, the combined fluxes, which is actually what is
given by the tower, EC tower, deviating from the water use efficiency. So it uses lot many equations like this, and finally it will give FT and FE. What is that? Fraction of transpiration and fraction of evaporation in ET. So first we observe the meteorological conditions between the two seasons. So here we separated the two seasons, and if you are pretty similar for temperature, radiation, VPD, LAI, relative humidity, but only the difference is in terms of the rainfall. Only the rainfall deviations are significant between the two seasons. Before applying the first hour data sets, we want to know whether it is properly closing the energy balance or not. That means whether net incoming energy is actually equal to the net outgoing energy or not. So we regress the net incoming energy, which is Rn minus G, with actually the heat exchanges, which is equal to Le plus H, the latent heat of vaporization and sensible heat flux. And we got pretty almost one-to-one line for all the flux data points. That means the energy balance closure is pretty good, so that whatever the data you get from the flux tower is reasonable good enough to use. Then on the right side, we observed actually how the energy is actually, or the energy fluxes are changing in time. So on an average day, from morning or early morning, late night 12 to the next, or during one calendar day, how actually the fluxes are happening. If you see, if you observe this, up to morning 7 o'clock, most of the fluxes are zero. There are no, because Rn itself is zero. Deep increasing and actually becoming peak almost at 1 o'clock, and then actually going down, and after 5:30 the Rn is actually almost like becoming zero. So this tells actually how within a day how various energy fluxes are actually being changing. Then before using the model, we first want to calibrate our model whether it is doing good for various parameters. On the left side, we calibrated for soil water contents, and on the right side, we observed actually the sensitivity of LAI to alpha B. If LAI has been changed, how the alpha B has been affected. So there is a tremendous variation. So with this, we can conclude that the model is doing pretty good with soil moisture, and also the model is, our mechanistic model is pretty sensitive to the LAI. And these are actually the model parameters, final optimal parameters that are considered in our analysis. Then, analyzing the results, we observed actually that ET fluxes are actually picking up during the vegetation, slowly going down in the ripening stage. So this is actually the complete picture of how ET is changing. If you consider on a given day, and on a ET values are located here. That means during almost like 10 to 2 o'clock, the ET fluxes are high, and also they are pretty much red, much high during these days, like almost like close to 70 to 100 on the day of the year. This is how actually the ET partition was happened with Penman-Monty, twin flux variance similarity, and also Priestley-Taylor. Of course, all the three are giving pretty different results because the input data itself is completely different from method to method. And we observe actually out of all the three, flux variance similarity method is relatively better in estimating and bifurcating the evapotranspiration fluxes. We compared the different methods using various goodness of fit indicators, mean error, mean absolute error, RMSE, MSE, G and R square, and so on. And then we observed actually the P of FES method is doing pretty good. Then on the bottom table, we also want to give some crop coefficient curves, because if some farmer who doesn't have any of these methodologies to implement want to estimate the ET, he can use these crop coefficient curves given by us to work for different conditions. If you observe, the crop coefficients actually are pretty low using Priestley-Taylor, very high using Penman-Monteith, moderate using flux variance similarity theory. And then we also compared which method is pretty doing good. For this, actually, we consider 4 Taylor diagrams. Taylor diagram for representing ET, for representing E for season 1. Similarly, Taylor diagram representing ET of season 2 and E of season 2. These Taylor diagrams will help us actually to know where each dot, whether red dot corresponds to flux variance similarity, blue corresponds to Priestley-Taylor, green corresponds to Penn. This is my observed point, and this is much closer to the observed point, which is red. Okay, even here also, the observed point is much closer to the red. Red dot is much closer to the observed point. Various statistical indicators, your in FES flux variance similarity method is doing pretty good. With this, actually, I propose the conclusions related to case 2. Flux variance similarity derived fluxes are very well in agreement with less symmetric observations with a high R square and low RMSE. Penman-Monteith and Priestley-Taylor consistently overestimated and underestimated the ET fluxes. PM model estimates are pretty sensitive to soil parameters, whereas PT are sensitive to leaf area index changes. FA has performed pretty good in bifurcating the ET fluxes, and the contribution of E is in the range of 4 during the ripening to almost like 17% during the reproduction stage. So it's mostly in the sense you have to be very managing the crop. Sir, I will again take 1 minute break before I start my case 3. Just want to ensure, are there any disturbances?
Okay, that's right. Not a problem, Professor Fanindra.
Okay, sure. First, actually, we evaluated the role of deficit irrigation strategies. If we slowly reduce the amount of water to be supplied, or if we slowly impose the water stress on the paddy crop, what is happening? We observed in the case 2, how best we can actually separate the evapotranspiration or the crop water requirements, crop water consumption. We have seen. Now, case study is actually what is currently going on. So I will only go until the end of preliminary results, where the intention is to see what is the role of IMD based weather forecast in irrigation scheduling. So what motivated us to take this case 3 is irrigation scheduling. Irrigation scheduling means at what time I have to supply and how much amount I have to supply. Is it all about irrigation scheduling? Okay, when I need to supply and how much I need to supply is done in an unscientific manner without analyzing the soil water crop interactions. So if you see any farmers, generally they talk among themselves, or they just see the availability of the resources and then just keep supplying the irrigation water to the crops. They really doesn't worry whether the crop is under stressed condition or actually under a unstressed condition. They really doesn't bother whether the water is available. Let us keep supplying water to the crop. The second motivation for us is IMD, Indian Meteorological Department, or even private things like SkyMet and all. They used to give weather forecast. Like actually, if you see IMD data at district level, they give the weather forecast. They give weather forecast. The short-term weather forecast, medium mainly refers to what is happening to the next 7 days. Next 7 days. Okay, if today day 2 to 8, what is about the precipitation? What is the temperature? What is the humidity? What is the solar radiation? What is the cloud cover? All these data sets, IMD and also SkyMet are going to publish in the public domains. We don't even need to pay for that one. So IMD weather forecast, the 7-day weather forecast or 5-day weather forecast, can it be used in irrigation scheduling? Okay, if I know that after 3 days it rains heavily, can I stop irrigating water now? Or can I reduce the amount of water to be supplied for irrigation? Because if I supply the amount full irrigation water now, and if it rains heavily after 3 days, it's a heavy waste of water for me because I used a excess amount of water on day one. So an efficient irrigation strategy will not only result in the minimization of losses, but also improve the loss appeal. So incorporating IMD forecast or incorporating weather forecast is not only helping me in minimizing the water losses, mainly the deep percolation or evaporation losses, crop yields. For example, if you see any developed countries, for example, US, they use actually the NOAA weather predictions, and farmers are actually advised on a real-time basis to go with amount of irrigation water, amount of timing, amount everything, pesticide application, or actually the nutrient management, everything based on the next 7 to 8 days or even next 1 month ahead forecast scenarios. But such a kind of information is still lacking. Though we have IMD forecast available in the public domain, their usability in the irrigation domain is not being rigorously being done. So this has motivated us. Based on this, we defined our objectives. Like the objectives are using the medium range weather forecast information to assess the crop water requirements in irrigation. So IMD gives 5-day weather forecast. Okay, so medium range means 5-day. Okay, if today is day 0, day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it will give all the parameters. Okay, temperature, rainfall, or you can say humidity, vapor pressure deficit, radiation, cloud cover. If you just go into the IMD weather forecast website, you can see for your own district what will be the next 5 days weather. Okay, so how to use that into your irrigation scheduling? For that, we have to modify our swap, any code. We choose a swap code or swap model because swap coding is actually it's an open source, so that I can quickly access that code and modify that. So we have chosen swap code and perform the rule-based irrigation. So what is this rule-based irrigation? I defined some rules. Rules means if the next 3 days it continuously rains, you stop my irrigation today. If the next 3 days it doesn't irrigate, if it is moderate rain occurs, then you cut short the irrigation by 40%. If the next 5 days there is no rainfall at all, but the temperature is also very high, which is actually, that means crop water requirement will be very high, then you irrigate to the fullest extent, and so on. And the compare irrigation scheduling and yield between traditional irrigation and forecast weather forecast. So what we want to also do is, we want to compare between traditional irrigation and forecast, because on one side, farmer is growing with traditional system, means he doesn't depend on the weather forecast, but still grow the crop. And on the other side, okay, we depend on the IMD weather forecast information, incorporate that data. Based on that, I will go with the different scheduling and want to see what is the crop water requirement, or what is the losses in this condition and in this conditions, what is the crop yield in this condition and this condition. Because unless you have some baseline scenario, it's very difficult to satisfy the community, right? So we consider the farmer's intuitive choice as actually the baseline scenario and consider this one. So we consider the local automatic weather station and also the IMD 5-day weather forecast. We abstain from these sites, which is precipitation, temperature, humidity, wind speed, radiation, and so on. And here, what IMD will give, IMD will say actually tomorrow the precipitation is say 0.25 mm, and day after tomorrow it is 0.75 mm. So it gives it in a kind of a numbers are actually the values. So rather than use, first we categorize them into 5 days: no rainfall, low, medium, high, and danger rainfall. That means whether the cumulative rainfall in the forecast period is 0 to 1 mm, then it's no rainfall. That means rather than using the numbers, we define the words NR, LR, MR, and so on. Similarly, what people have not addressed, what we are addressing is also, we are also defining the future evapotranspiration. Evapotranspiration is actually crop water requirement. It is not only the precipitation, other parameters will also drive, because temperature, vapor pressure deficiency, and also drives actually the what is the demand from the crop. So we also consider the reference evapotranspiration and then define low, medium, sufficient, excess and danger ET values. Okay, so we define the forecast values like this. Then we start actually the code. We started modifying. The student is modifying. This is actually this time scale. This is actually observed day one. We are actually observed F1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, these are actually the forecast values. What actually being used in the forecast information. So how the coding is being done? Irrigation is triggered based on the current day soil moisture. The current day soil moisture is above threshold or less than threshold. Current day precipitation and future current day precipitation and ET. What is today's precipitation and today's water requirement or by the crop? And precipitation forecasted ET. That means future precipitation in the next 5 days and future next 5 days. What is the water requirement? Based on these conditions, we set up some thresholds and actually the categories and started working on modifying the code. And the preliminary results, if you observe actually that if you observe the forecast is significantly high for 1 day lead time. So we consider 3 lead times: 1 day lead time, 3 day lead times, and 5 day lead times. That means our as a hypothesis one is 1 day forecast given by MD is true. Second hypothesis is up to 3 days, whatever the forecast given by MD is true. And the third assumption or third hypothesis is up to 5 days, whatever the IMD forecast given by IMD is true. Because this is actually a deterministic, we assume that we consider 3 different lead times: 1 day, 3 day, and 5 day. And we observed actually, if you observe actually, the no rain forecast is pretty. The 5 day forecast high. That means if for 5 day lead time, if IMD is saying that if it happens to be medium rain, that prediction is pretty high, almost like 0.6. So we observed actually to what extent the IMD forecaster is reliable. So for reliability of this one, we also define CSI, critical success index. Critical success index means the number of hits by number of hits plus number of false alarms plus number of actually the false targets. In the sense, how if the rainfall is forecast is giving as a medium rain, in reality whether it is actually coming as a medium rain or given as a false alarm. Is it a false alarm or a false hit? We observed, and based on that we observed actually the critical success index values. And preliminarily we also actually, if you see here, the no rainfall prediction is pretty high. That means even that is also good, because if IMD is saying that no rainfall, that means mostly it is happening. What does it mean? At least it gives a confidence that okay, if no rainfall prediction is high, then I will go for irrigation. If the rainfall prediction is pretty low, then actually I will start my irrigation depth and so on. So these are my preliminary results. Still the final depth still I was unable to. So we want to actually from the previous thing, we want to come up with actually the optimal lead time that IMD forecast origin can go. In summary, sustainable agricultural practices aims at actually improving the crop production with the available resources under changing climate without having a detrimental effect on the environment. In spite of huge arable lands and production quantities, yield and water productivity of Indian crops are far less than the world average. That is a very alarming condition for us. There should be a scope to improve things by practicing the sustainable strategies. Coming to the paddy's case, imposing low to moderate stress will improve the crop yield and also reduces the water stress. crop coefficient and yield response curves derived from FES are pretty good for Indian conditions, and incorporating IMD weather forecast with what they lead, still we are need to come up where can improve the irrigation scheduling and crop yield monitoring. With this, actually, I will stop my presentation. Before stopping my presentation, I should thank 4 people. My PhD student, because it's all his work, actually, I'm presenting. Second is DST FAST project, funded by MHRD, Government of India, for financially supporting to do the field experiments. And Professor Satans for the invitation to give my presentation, and for Jakar of GC Bikaner for organizing this workshop. Now I will open the floor for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Fanindra. In fact, it was really a very wonderful presentation, very informative as well, and which has got something that has got a practical application of it. I mean, that's something which is real kind of study. So if we can disseminate this kind of information, and if we adopt such strategies down to every village level, for sure this can do a real good to our country in terms of management of water and maybe yield of the crops and all. So I think I mean, personally, I picked up so good impression. I was all through present in your talk, liked it a lot, and appreciate you a lot for this very wonderful presentation. Thank you, Dr. Fanindra. And similar kind of echoes I can see through in the chat box as well. All participants, they are appreciating your talk so very nicely. In fact, it's been very wonderful. Thank you. And yes, you can unmute yourself, sir. You can unmute yourself. Professor Fanindra, you can unmute yourself. Yeah, please. It's okay.
Sir, 1 second, sir. I'm unable to maximize my screen. Okay, let me. Oh, sorry, sir, I'm sharing my screen.
Stop sharing that.
I forgot that one. Okay, sorry.
There's this link for stop sharing in case. And yes, now as the speaker is already given, I mean, it's open for question answer. In case the participants they wish to ask any question, they can unmute themselves and please ask the questions directly. And thank you for all your appreciation for the speaker. I am really very glad to know that you liked the session, and yes, I also join you in appreciating. It was very nice presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Actually, yeah, thank you.
Yes, all any participant may please unmute and ask the question. No problem.
A very good morning, sir. So myself, Dhruv Saxena, from Civil Department. So very informative and insightful presentation. Sir. Thank you, sir. So I have some particular questions since my work is also going on the same lines. How did you obtain the data for a long scale, and also what were the softwares and methodologies? Methodology you have discussed. What were the softwares and you used, and how you obtained the required data? Like from IMD, if we have to fetch the data from them, they even for the academic purposes we have to pay a certain, and it takes a lot of time. So any suggestions and sir, your views, sir, on?
Sure, sir. Coming to the data, so actually it's a two kind of things. If at all you want to test some specific methodology, I strongly suggest you to have your own field experiments, your own actually data monitoring systems, your own actually the field setup, because you will have more control on the parameters or the fluxes happening in the system. For example, if you rely on maybe this automatic weather station data at a nearby region, that particular data may not exactly replicate your experiment location parameters. So one point, sir, if funding is available or if financial constraints are not there, I strongly advise you to perform your own field experiments, have your own automatic weather station, have your own soil moisture sensors, have your own leaf area index sensors, or have your own crop yield monitoring devices, and then monitor all these things under a clearly controlled condition. Point number one. Point number two, if you do not have facility to afford in a financial sense, then the two things you can depend for meteorological data. Every state government, most of it, actually, their disaster management programs have a network of weather stations in their own state. For example, Telangana Disaster Network actually has their weather station located in every mandal headquarters. So, a mandal or taluk headquarters. So, you have the weather station data of that region, which is one of the basis for most of your crop models. Point number two. Or you can even depend on the satellite data sets. Nowadays, most of the, so for example, Sentinel or Landsat or MODIS, these are actually the open source satellite images, which gives most of the crop related parameters in different spectral bands. For example, in thermal, visible bands and so on, that will be helpful to comment about your conditions. So it all depends. If your project can afford, you set up your own experiments, set up your own data sets, you'll have more controlled conditions. If not, you depend on the state government disaster management data sets or IMD weather forecast data sets or the satellite imageries. That's answer to your first question. Second question related to the softwares, I strongly suggest to you go with the softwares that are recommended by FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization, by United Nations, something like SimDual KC or Aquacrop and so on. The reason being is these softwares are well recognized by the outside scientific community. Point number one, right? Point number two, if you are working with the coding part, means if you need to change the code or if you need to add a specific module in the software, for example, you are trying some maybe the effect of mulching which is not present in the software. So you need to add a code for the mulching and then you have to link it. In such case, I suggest you to go with the open source softwares like Swap and all, which could be very easily versatile for you. So that's my answer, sir.
Thank you, Professor Phanindra. I hope Dhruv Saxena used an answer. Yeah, Dhruv, hopefully, I mean, you got your answer? Maybe.
केला ले लो, मैं 1 मिनट एक क्वेश्चन पूछ के आ रही हूँ.
Yes, anybody else? Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Yes, please. Dr. Anita Bhatia.
And thank you for your very enlightening session. And I'd like to ask you a question that as we all know, these are the pandemic time. It's a crisis of the time due to the COVID-19. Then I'll ask you that will COVID-19 pandemic sustainably inhibit or induce increases food crop production by the farmer this cropping season?
Sir, can you just repeat
Will COVID-19 pandemic sustainably inhibit or induce increased food crop production by farmer this cropping season?
Increase the food production.
Will the pandemic have some negative impact on the food production, so to say? That's what the question is.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Actually, yeah. I'm not very sure of my answer, but specific to the Telangana state, farmers were actually, the farming activities or actually the farming operations were not disturbed during this pandemic time actually. For example, even the monsoon hit the most of the states at the right time. Okay, so the sowing and all, actually the major activities were not delayed. So I pretty feel that it may not have an effect in terms of the crop production, but it may have some effect in terms of the crop marketability.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's right. I suppose,
Yeah,
Dr.
Thank you, sir.
In fact, all across, I think there's not much of an effect onto the farming activities.
And all that. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, anybody else? Any other question?
Hello,
Yes, please.
I am Praveen from Engineering College, Bikaner.
Yeah, Dr. Praveen. Yeah, and
sir.
Dr. Praveen
Dr.
is one of
Praveen,
the coordinators. One of the coordinators as well.
yes, sir. Dr. Praveen is established.
Good afternoon, sir. I wanted to know whether some kind of experiments were carried out using genetically modified crops. Is your model equally applicable to these genetically modified crops also, which include paddy or any other variety?
Yeah. Good question, sir, actually, but our focus mostly doesn't look into the genetic variability among the crops. Uh, what we generally do, sir, actually, we generally consider actually the most valued or actually mostly what most of the farmers generally, which kind of a genome type generally they go with, we consider or we perform the experiments with those things. Okay, so our major objective is actually,
My question is,
sir. Yes, sir.
hello. The purpose of my question
Yes,
was that farmers are using the farming practices and all. They actually go for a good variety seed, that is the good germplasm. And if that is compatible, then the model that we actually impose on them seems to be very expensive for them to adopt. So I was asking about that aspect only regarding when we carry out the sustainability of the cultivation in this manner.
I completely agree. For example, ICRISAT in Hyderabad actually is working a lot in terms of actually coming up with a drought tolerant or weather resistant or genotypes. But yes, they definitely add to the sustainability. But our focus doesn't actually involve into the variabilities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Praveen. Maybe we can take up one or two more questions, and then we'd like to thank the speaker and close the session. So, yes, anyone of the participants? Or otherwise, it's
Okay. No questions in the chat box. Yeah.
even I was also scanning through. I mean, but yes, I mean, I'm so happy that it was like, yeah, even I was scanning through, no, not many questions. All appreciation to you, sir. So it's really good. And yeah, to be honest, it was, I mean, very, very informative. And in fact, we need to adopt these kind of strategies for sure. Otherwise, countries like, Netherlands for that matter, or maybe Israel, it's very small countries, and look at the crop, can look at their, the farm produce, the quality of those farm produce, and they maybe the very size and all that of, whatever we grow here, it's altogether different. So we can also, if adopt these kind of scientifically driven strategies into irrigation. So I mean, in agriculture, for sure, that's going to help our country, and we could be, absolutely number one. And we, given the kind of, climatic conditions and the geography that we do have, we can grow any crop that is used anywhere in the planet. So maybe we can be a good export market in that sense. I mean, whatever is needed by anybody, anywhere, we can grow it. Like.
Completely agree, sir. For example, most of the developed countries are actually facing problem in terms of not fertile or arable lands, or in terms of actually the variable terrain features, and also not the supportive climatic conditions, good amount. These are all actually the advantages or resources for Indian scenario.
Yes.
But in spite of these advantages, just other disadvantages are dominating a lot. Because of it, the productivity is much lower than many. See, in terms of the numbers, we may be high, but in terms of efficiency, we are low. We have to improve that kind of an efficiency component to get the numbers much higher. For example, so for example, there is a tremendous scope in actually trying for novel or innovative irrigation and agricultural practices, India has its own limitations in terms of the fragmentation and so on. So any experiments, field scale experiments are very required, because you cannot adopt any model developed for another country directly to Indian scenario. So you have to do a lot much experimentation before say that this model is doing pretty good and this is actually what should be done for Indian condition. So I clearly feel there is a big research gap that need to be filled for Indian conditions in terms of the crop activity and management.
Yeah, absolutely right. So thank you, Professor Phanindra. In fact, and let's hope and wish that one day we will be number one in agriculture produce as well, and very good varieties of every produce that we produce here. So thank you so much. In fact, and I'm really very happy with participants. You're so generous in sharing your appreciation. That's really something that encourages us and encourages the speaker as well. So maybe next time around, whenever we organize any event, we'll look into and we'll definitely reach out to you. So thank you, Professor Phanindra, for such a nice talk.
Sir, one question recently come in chat box, that is how rotation of crop is beneficial from one of the parts.
There is this question here. Okay, right.
Okay. So of course, crop rotation is beneficial mainly because the nutrient management and nutrient balance can take place only through crop rotation. So nutrient imbalance heavily happens because of the absence of the rotation, particularly. And so crop rotation is heavily beneficial, sir, because the same crop growing multiple times, definitely the soil fertility will be lost. Actually, the soil ability to supply the nutrients to a given crop. So some leguminous crops like pulses and all, if they grow in between, they will add actually the nutrients to the soil, which is actually very good for the next kind of a rotation. Of course, it should be practiced. That is what being practiced elsewhere.
Yeah, very right, very right. Thank you. I hope the participants can answer, right? So thank you so much. And in fact, Professor Phanindra, I mean, it was very nice, the presentation, and equally nicely you handle all queries as well. I mean, you're so responsive to, so comprehensive kind of response to each and every query. So thank you so much. Now, I think over to Dr. Jakar for his concluding remarks and maybe, a lot of thanks or whichever way. Dr. Jakar, you please, your talk.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Phanindra, for your very informative, very nice, wonderful talk. And I think all participants enjoyed your talk. And in fact, your talk is very relevant to the present condition of our country. As all we know, our country is, our whole economy of our country is based on agriculture. And you have very nicely shown some of the case study of Netherlands and Israel, and what are the constraints in our country's agriculture. And you have again shown some of the case study of our country, our agriculture. And again, the government of India and our Prime Minister vision to increase the income of the farmer and just to double of the income of the farmer and Atmanirbhar Bharat. And this all will only possible if our country and if we adopt all these scientific approaches to our agriculture in our country, and then only our nation will be the Atmanirbhar, and the income of the farmer will increase. So your talk is very useful, very beneficial to our country as well as all the participants, and you have nicely presented the things also very well, and it is relevant to our nation's problem nowadays the farmers are facing. So it is a very nice, and thank you so much, sir, for your very nice presentation once again, and thanks all participants for your patience and nice interaction with the speaker. So thank you so much, sir, and over to Professor Satan.
Thank you, Dr. Jakar, for summing up so nicely. And Professor Phanindra, you're doing a great work, in fact, and we are really very happy, and we'll definitely like to connect with you, again for some other academic activity. You have inspired us all, and it was really very motivating. And especially, it's absolutely of practical use. And maybe this is key to the growth of our country. If we work around the idea that you said today, will be number one country in agriculture as well. There are countries, despite all difficulties, all difficult climatic conditions and difficult terrains and all, they are doing wonders. In like Israel, it's kind of a desert area. So I think we can look up to that day when we'll have all these kind of research up to the village level, and we'll have a very, very good growth prospects for our country. So thank you so much, and thank you to all the participants for being there with us in this session so very nicely. And Professor Phanindra will share a document with you. Please do the needful and share back with us, right? Thank you so much. And I think Ravi, now we can close the session.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I also thank you very much for all the participants, and especially Professor Satyans and Jakar, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So can I leave the session, sir?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Thank you very much.